broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by theunshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everyone and welcome finally to tonight's show. The date is Friday the 14th of February 2020. It is just past 7:30 p.m. here in Melbourne. Now the reason for the half-hour delay as scheduled is because it turns out there needed to be a software update with the live streaming program that I use, and so I had to update it and then reauthorize all of the YouTube permissions so I can stream to YouTube. It certainly wasn't a love bug since this is Valentine's Day, as I hope to bring you messages of love tonight. We are just live for now on the Tim Wilms YouTube channel. I see that everyone's been hanging out in the live chat for the show to start, finally here. And I've also got the entropy link up working. So if you want to ask me a question throughout tonight's show or send through a super chat, you can do so by using the entropy link. It's just going to be myself for tonight's show because for those of you who have or have not been keeping up with the developments in federal politics, it's the end of the federal parliamentary sitting fortnight, and well, there's been a lot of developments that have happened over the past 2 weeks, and so I thought this would be a good time on a Friday night to bring you a wrap of all of the important things. And there's been a lot of positives, I would say, with some great acts of political bravery from politicians from both sides of politics, a breakout of common sense. It must be some sort of political virus in Canberra. And now, before I get on to the substance of the show, there was quite a bit of shocking news that broke this afternoon, and that was Yemini, Ozraeli, proud citizen of Australia and Israel and TR News reporter. Yemini, he's only aged 34, but yesterday he was rushed to hospital suffering from a cardiac arrest and nearly died. I've got the Instagram post here. So he's, as you can see there, he's got all the tubes there. It's quite intense. I'm so thankful, I'm so lucky. Yesterday I went into cardiac arrest. My heart stopped for 5 minutes. My partner saved my life by performing CPR for 8 minutes until the ambulance arrived. If not for her, I wouldn't be here today. Grateful, thanks, lucky. Life is too short. Now, his girlfriend, you might have seen in a few of his previous Instagram posts, he puts an emoji over her face, obviously, to safeguard anonymity, because Avi has a lot of enemies and they know no bounds. They'd probably want to go after her. So I've always affectionately described her as Emoji Girl. Obviously, Avi in his online and Scream persona is very provocative and doesn't take any crap. His last video, he indicated that he was going to be suing Victoria Police for his move on arrest on Australia Day when he went to interview the Invasion Day protesters. And of course, the police tried to move him on through the breach of the peace charge, or whatever you want to call it, authority. And Yemini, he obviously arced up about this, and so then they arrested him for, what was it, obstructing police activity. And so, well, this breach of the peace has been used on him before. It's been used on other patriot activists who've tried to go to leftist events to ask them questions. And even, well, as we saw on Australia Day, Neil Erickson just stood on the steps of Flinders Street Station with the Australian flag, was moved on because the Invasion Day protesters were coming to that intersection between Flinders Street and Federation Square in Young and Jackson and the Cathedral. And then, of course, the Proud Boys, they also got moved on for breach of the peace when they did their Governor Arthur Phillip did nothing wrong stand. But yes, with Avi's near-death experience, it's another reminder we're all human and a public life can take its toll. Obviously, we hope that he makes a full recovery. We only lost Wilson Gavin last month after his protest against child drag story time in the City of Brisbane Library, and obviously there was backlash against him online, and then the next day he took his own life, so we don't need to lose another one. And if you're watching James Fox Higgins's show after the Uncockables last night, he got contacted by a viewer of his show, Brian Jackson, who was considering taking his own life. So James cut the show short to just get on the phone with him and try and obviously prevent him from doing what he was thinking, and hopefully James has got through to him. So yeah, it's obviously we're in this political toxicity environment where, well, the left, they don't view their political opponents as human, and obviously there were people who were gleeful that Wilson Gavin took his own life, and I haven't seen much other comment on Avi's cardiac arrest, but you can probably bet there'll be some of his enemies, leftists on Twitter or wherever, will be saying some nasty things. And I'm extremely grateful that in our online communities in the Australian alt media community, that we're all very supportive of each other. We have fun in the live chats. There's a lot of banter on air, as all of you are probably doing to me now. As you can see, I'm still trying to check that everything's working and keeping up with your chats, given the technical difficulties that we had. Port Film Co-op has said, oh no, sorry, Jupiter Kesmer said, haven't seen Ozmeds for a while. Australian Meditations, he made Stefanos. Yes, Stefanos he's fine. He was in Maddie's Modern Life Australia Day vlog. He's just taking a bit of a break, which is obviously fair enough. And well, obviously, I don't know about the circumstances of Avi's cardiac arrest, but hopefully he takes a bit of a break, and so it allows him to recover, because 34 years old, obviously Wilson Gavin was 21. It's really scary when people have got their whole lives ahead of them, that it can be cut short. But I'm not going to dwell on as I said, it's Valentine's Day, and I'm not going to dwell on the negatives. Avi, he is still alive, and that's a positive thing. So get well soon, Avi. We're all, well, I'm not religious, but we're all rooting for you. Now, this is going to be one of my segues. Obviously, Avi stood for the Australian Liberty Alliance in the 2014 Victorian state election in South Metropolitan region. The president of that party is Debbie Robinson. She is from Perth. Her husband, Tony Robinson, is a surgeon over there. Before they started the Australian Liberty Alliance, they founded the Q Society, which described itself as an Islam critical organization, and they burst onto the public scene when they brought Geert Wilders to Australia at the beginning of 2013, and this was before the cancel culture was in full swing. Gillard was Prime Minister at the time. Chris Bowen was the Immigration Minister. There was a delay with Geert Wilders' visa, but he was allowed in, and he spoke in Melbourne and Sydney. I went to the Melbourne event. It was at the same venue that Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux spoke at, the one up at Somerton. I can't remember the exact name on it, but yes, and obviously the socialist alternative, or whatever group there was back then, protested out the front. They hadn't quite got as radicalized and as aggressive and violent as they have now, but they still made a scene. They took an old lady's ticket. I think they pushed another one to the ground. But there was another Q Society event, which was in 2017, a fundraiser, which it had to be at a secret location where the attendees, they had to take a secret magical mystery bus to the location, but the socialists, they still turned up to rock the bus and try to stop people getting on. Geert Wilders did come back to Australia to launch the Australian Liberty Alliance for the 2016 state election. So the reason why I'm mentioning the Q Society, now hopefully this works, the screen sharing thing, yeah. So this is, Sydney Morning Herald has said this is an exclusive. Q Society deregisters fearing lawsuits under religious freedom legislation. It's interesting that Jacqueline Melee, she said she's called it the right wing. She hasn't used the term far right or extreme right wing. So that's, I would say, quite measured journalism there from you, Jacqueline. Q Society has announced it would deregister because religious freedom legislation will make it an easy target for hostile litigation and put its board members at risk of being sued. Carolee Smith, who did videos for the Q Society and was the founder of Halal Choices, she was sued by one of the halal certifiers, Muhammad Al-Mahathi, and there was an out-of-court settlement over that, so it's certainly nothing new to the Q Society. But Debbie Robinson, she's also president of the Q Society, has decided at its last AGM to voluntarily deregister its incorporated organisation. Had been registered in Victoria as a non-profit. And it mentions here it lost so much financial support, it can't cover the cost of insurance, statutory compliance and office administration, and cites the risk of federal legislation concerning religious tolerance likely to change this year. And as you know, I've been completely consistent in that I think this Religious Discrimination Act is going to have unintended consequences, because Christians, they think it's going to protect them from LGBT persecution in the wake of same-sex marriage. And I made this point to Pastor Danny Nyalia, who I interviewed here in the studio on Wednesday night. Thankfully, there were no technical issues then. And obviously, he was the first target of Victoria's Racial and Religious Tolerance Act, because 3 members of the Islamic Council of Victoria, white converts to Islam, they sat in one of his Catch the Fire Ministry's information sessions on Islam. This was in 2002, and made a religious vilification complaint under Section 8 of the Racial and Religious Tolerance Act. And it was a 5-year legal battle for Danny Nyalia and another pastor, Daniel Scott, and the Catch the Fire ministries. Eventually, the apology order was overturned by the Victorian Supreme Court of Appeal, but not before it cost him, Danny, $600,000 in legal bills, which included $1.5 million of pro bono work. I said this to Danny, this could, because in practice, a Religious Discrimination Act, it's not going to work in the favour of Christians, it'll probably work in the favour of Muslims. And Danny Nyalia said he was quite cautiously supportive. And while we're on this subject, one of the most vocal voices in the Liberal Party room in favour of a Religious Discrimination Act was Conchetta Fierravanti-Wells, New South Wales Senator. She's a former minister in both the Abbott and Turnbull governments. It's fair to say that she's been dumped to the backbench now. She's in the twilight of her career, and she'll probably get challenged by somebody in the New South Wales Liberal left moderate faction for her pre-selection when she's up for another 6-year Senate term at the next election. But this is what she said here: flawed. Liberal Senator wants Religious Discrimination Bill scrapped. It's already been through 2 drafts, and obviously it's good to see that the Morrison Government is realising that it's got to be properly drafted so it doesn't have unintended consequences, which I'm worried about. And Conchetta Fierravanti-Wells has said, "I've come to the conclusion that no bill is better than this flawed bill." She goes on to say in the article that given the complexities of the issues, she wants a national harmonisation approach between state and federal religious freedom discrimination laws. So certainly, quite rightfully, this is a very delicate issue, and I've gone through the unintended consequences. I wrote a story for the Unshackled last year about how the National Council of Imams in Australia, they wanted a federal blasphemy law to make Islamophobia illegal. And of course, what is Islamophobia? That is the question. I'm just going to put the entropy link back in the live chat there, and I believe that I've got the stream working on the Unshackled main channel. I'll just check it now. Yeah, I have got it working, but no one's there. You're all over here. Anyway, doesn't matter. But it is, if you want to head over to the Unshackled channel and want to send a super chat, you can do it directly through YouTube there, because I know that the reason why I've started multi-streaming to both my own channel and also the Unshackled main channel is because it's monetized. You can send a super chat directly through YouTube. But it seems like we've got over all of these technical issues, which is great. So we'll power on ahead. It's going to be, we'll go for no more than an hour tonight. Keep it, because it is a Friday night. It's just me. Keep it short and sweet. Now, obviously, it was fueled by the bushfires. The climate hysteria continues. In fact, just today in Melbourne's town hall, there is. I'll just bring it up on the screen here. This is Eventbrite, the National Climate Emergency Summit. It's happening today and tomorrow, convening citizens, leaders and change makers. I haven't heard that term before, change makers, to go beyond the declarations and start shaping Australia's response to the climate emergency. I was just going into the ticket prices there. So yeah, a citizen ticket for 2 days is $59, and for 1 day it is $48. So that's what you've got to pay to save the world there. So yeah, this is because the Morrison government is refusing to act, so citizens have got to get together in the government's absence. That's how they see it. I've got a super chat over on the Unshackled YouTube channel from Port Film Co-op. Thank you for $2 Australian. Says logos rising. It was one of the ones that, yeah, you stayed with me through the half an hour delay, so thank you so much for that. But yes, it seems to be that, well, we all know the ABC's premiere program, Q&A, which of course infamously last year had the all-feminist panel where they... well, it was Mona Ethaway who proposed a final solution to the patriarchy question by proposing that maybe 1 million men needed to be killed to defeat the patriarchy. That was Fran Kelly was the host for that evening, because you can't have a male host on an all-feminist panel. Tony Jones was still the official host of the show at that time, but Tony Jones stepped down at the end of 2019. He'd hosted the show since its beginning in, I think, 2009. and it's progressively got worse and unwatchable over that time. He stepped down so he could go overseas to be with his wife, Sarah Ferguson, who's a foreign correspondent also for the ABC. So Hamish MacDonald, who's a former fill-in host for Waleed Ali on the project, and also hosted few programs on ABC's Radio National, and basically since it came back, it's the second episode back for Q&A this year. Every week it's about climate change. There's all questions about climate change, and it's basically, there's always sometimes the token conservative who goes into the lion's den and is quizzed about, or do they believe the science, or will you do more? Jim Molan was the brave one last week. he was the commander of the coalition forces in Iraq. If he can handle that, he can probably handle an hour of lefty lunacy on ABC's Q&A. But I just want to play this to you. I've got all these clips ready for you to go. This is a questioner on Q&A who said that she wanted to have a family and children, but felt that she couldn't because of the climate emergency. Let's have a look.
My question is about things that individuals can do. So changing your diet is one of the most impactful things a person can do on their own to reduce their environmental footprint. So how can we encourage Australians to eat less meat?
Alice, you describe yourself as someone that has experienced climate anxiety. And what's that done to change your view, not just on food, but also family?
Probably a couple of years ago, as a result of studying what I have. I've studied environmental and climate science. I came to the conclusion that it was unsafe, unethical probably, and just a bad choice for me to make to bring children into the world. I'd really like a family, but I'm way too scared to do it.
And what does that mean? I mean, that must be such an incredibly difficult thing, given that, as you say, you want to raise a family.
Absolutely.
And now that is quite heartbreaking, because she said she wants to have a family but feels that she couldn't because of what she'd learnt in her climate and environmental science degree, which obviously she got it from a university which is full of climate change propaganda. But my message to her is, if you want to have a family and children, please do it, because obviously you've been fed this doom and gloom message, but we are living in one of the most technological advanced and also with rising living standards as well. So I would certainly take as you know, I'm not a Christian, take the advice of Genesis 9:7, which is, be ye fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundancy in the earth and multiply therein. And I know that this disturbed a lot of people, what this woman said. And Craig Kelly, who is a Liberal backbencher, he is probably the most prominent climate change skeptic in the Parliament. He was the one who went on Piers Morgan's Good Morning Britain show about the Australian bushfires, and was pressed to accept the link between the bushfires and climate change, and he was pretty much dissed by all of his colleagues, and he's pretty much going all out on his Facebook page. He doesn't care anymore. He's just posting what he believes the public need to know about climate change. So this was one of his member statements in the Parliament.
I call the member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The decision for a couple to have children is normally personal and private. However, last night, the national broadcaster put to air comments of a young lady saying she was too scared to bring children into this world because of climate anxiety. Sadly, this is what hysteria, alarmism, propaganda and misinformation has brought. The facts are that a child born today is 100 times safer from extreme weather than their grandparents. And this trend continues. Last year was the safest year in human history from extreme weather events. And a child born this year will enjoy a life expectancy 25 years longer than that of their grandparents. And while we worry about the coronavirus, remember our great-grandparents survived World War I, lived through the Spanish flu, which killed between 50 and 100 million people, about 3 to 6% of the world's population. They then survived the horrors of the Great Depression and World War II. And with the very real threat of nuclear war, our parents and grandparents maintained the optimism and decided to have children, otherwise none of us would be here today. The reality is a child born today will inherit a world that is safer and more prosperous than ever before, and given the freedom and opportunity, they will make it even better.
And he's right. When, obviously, we were told during the Australian bushfire season, as it's referred to now, the Black Summer, we were told these were unprecedented bushfires. There had never been such horrific events in Australia. And, of course, I looked up Australia's bushfire history. They've always been a part of Australian life. But, obviously, well, it's evident to everybody that Australian summers are extremely hot, especially in Queensland and up in the northern part of Western Australia, and we'll add to that South Australia as well. They have massive heat waves. Back in 50, 70 years ago, during these heat waves, people actually used to die of heat stroke. That's unheard of today because obviously, well, I'm sitting in this nice air-conditioned studio now that we have our homes with, most modern homes now have air conditioning systems. You can get a fan very relatively cheaply from Bunnings or wherever. And you can, when you just go down to the shops or any public amenity, you can be cool. It's only when, well, you're actually out in nature yourself that the heat can really affect you. But obviously with climate change mitigation policies, they are pushing up the price of electricity, and air conditioning chews up a lot of electricity. So people could die from heat stroke again, but it's not because of climate change or that technology hasn't advanced. It's the fact that climate change mitigation policies have made it too expensive for some people to turn on the air conditioning, or if too many people turn on their air conditioning at once, there can be blackouts, as the Victorian Energy Minister, Lily Ambrosa, said, and some power companies have said refrain from turning on the air conditioning too much on hot days so we don't have a blackout. So there you go. Now, speaking of the ABC, because it is them that's putting out most of the climate change propaganda. I know that The Guardian gives it a run for its money. They're doing a special series on Australia's Black Summer due to the consequences of climate change. But the ABC, as all public entities do, they're asking the federal government for more money. And so this was Liberal National Senator James McGrath talking about what he thought of the ABC asking for more money. They already get over $1 billion of taxpayers' money a year.
ABC must show how it can manage its existing budget before asking for a bigger one. Remember, its existing budget is over $1.1 billion. $1.1 billion of taxpayers' money.
Now, I know that there's a lot of defenders of the ABC. They've got renewed vigour over the bushfire season because they say without the ABC we wouldn't have an emergency broadcaster. They're the only media outlet that invests in rural and regional Australia. And yes, if there is a gap in the market, and obviously there needs to be a public service to warn the public about bushfires, floods and other cyclones, other natural disasters. But we don't need it mixed with climate change propaganda. We certainly don't need on the ABC opinion programs such as Q&A. It has no factual... It's not a factual-based show. It's not an investigative show. It's not a reporting show. It's an opinion show. And it's basically a leftist echo chamber where they all sit around and saying, oh, our worldview is the correct one, and we can't believe that there's ignorant, evil people who don't agree with us, and the world would be so better if we just had people like us in charge. And you can also scrap the comedy channel, ABC Comedy, because, well, it's basically consumer fraud because, well, like most modern comedy, it's not actually funny. And of course, that gave us that shocking Tonightly program with Tom Ballard, that Get Crackin', where they had that Indigenous woman take a dump on, was it the Australian flag or something? It was something disgusting, something like that. But yes. Certainly the ABC at the very least could be slimmed down, and programs like Q&A, it was revealed during the Zaki Mallah controversy where they got the terrorist sympathiser and convicted criminal. I think they paid for his bus fare in to ask Chief Shobo a question about stripping terrorists of dual citizenship. There was about 6 or 7 producers involved in getting him in, which is, do you need 6 or 7 producers for a weekly show? Just got a super chat here from Senator Slayer for $2 He says, welcome to Timmy time. All hail uncle. Well, not actually an uncle yet. I have 2 brothers, but... no, they haven't had a child yet, but we're a young family, so it's all in the works. And it is Valentine's Day, so anything's possible with love in the air. Obviously, the mainstream media, they've been eager to talk about the division in the Liberal and National Party rooms because, well, after Barnaby Joyce's failed effort to return to the Nationals leadership and Deputy Prime Minister ship, we saw that some Nationals, they voted with Labor to install Lou O'Brien as Deputy Speaker. He quit the National Party room, but he's still a Liberal National MP. So both the Liberal and Nationals preferred pick, Nationals whip Damien Drum didn't get the Guernsey there, which involved a pay rise as well. And Matt Canavan is also on the backbench with Barnaby Joyce, along with Bridget McKenzie as well. They're pushing for the Morrison Government to invest taxpayers' money in new coal-fired power stations, since all the corporations now are all in their woke mode, where they don't want to be seen investing to people who don't even like capitalism or companies anyway, investing in dirty fossil fuels. Was it BP and was it AGL? They're saying that they're getting out of fossil fuels by 2050. Actually, BP said they're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. So, and of course, BP stands for British Petroleum. So what's it going to stand for in 2050? British... so someone can come up in the comments what the P can stand for. Harry Reich has sent through $5. Thank you so much. Just said, "Hail, Uncle." Is that going to be the new catch cry of the show here? Is that what you're going to call me now? As I said at the beginning, you guys. But yes, and it was also picked up by the media this week. Well, because they've on the backbench have got spare time on their hands in terms of how busy politicians can be. Barnaby Joyce and Matt Canavan, they've launched a podcast this week. Weatherboard and Iron with Barnaby Joyce and Matt Canavan. First episode's up here. This is on Spotify, but you can get it on all your different podcasting apps. Goes for half an hour. It's obviously named after, Barnaby Joyce's autobiography Made of Weatherboard and Iron, Politics, the Bush and the Future of Our Regions. And of course the political commentariats say that this is not helpful for the tensions. Of course they're going to play up the tensions in the conservative side of politics. But the Morrison government has been quite consistent, is that they're sticking with the Paris targets. Obviously, they didn't adopt the clean energy target. They did not adopt Malcolm Turnbull's national energy guarantee. Senator Slayer has sent through $2 said Mr. Chicken Gruber did nothing wrong. I don't know who that is. If he's an historical person, I'll look him up, but I've already read it out. So, but I was just reading out a super chat then. And Port Film Cover sent through $2. Uncle should really be xyz.net.au. You're saying that I should be on xyz.net.au? What's wrong with the Unshackled? I mean, obviously we've been light on our written articles lately, but we're just as based as XYZ, albeit in a different way. We have a different niche, but we complement each other in different ways. They have their editorial line, and so do we. So there you go. But yes, I would say that what they're mainly Queensland nationals. Obviously, it's coal country up there, as signified by the huge swings in central and north Queensland to the LNP at the federal election, which is obviously influenced by the Adani coal mine approval there, which it is finally going ahead. And Matt Canavan, he did play a big part as Resources Minister during that election in campaigning for the Adani coal mine. But yes, and I'm going to quote the established commentariat, obviously they're saying that the moderate Liberals in the inner cities who want to retain their seats, they've indicated they're going to be more vocal on climate change action, but these political hardheads, their analysis is that they won't arc up as much as the Queensland nationals. They can basically be placated, but they want to go through an episode of beating their chest. But we shall see. I mentioned the Australia's bushfire season, how it has fueled the climate action movement, and obviously it was highlighted in the media the role that arson had played in starting a lot of these fires, and this was deemed as fake news by the ABC, basically because some media outlets misquoted the people charged, claiming that they'd all been charged with arson, where some of them had been charged with starting a fire not deliberately, but through ignoring a total fire ban or through a cigarette butt out the window. But Conchetta Fierravanti-Welsh, she's had a busy week, and obviously, well, as I said, she's at the end of the career. She hasn't got much to lose, and so she's speaking her mind more. This is the statement that she made in the Senate about the role that arson played during the summer.
Those alleged arsonists already arrested need to be thoroughly investigated by law enforcement. Who are they? What was their motive and intent? Are they lone actors or part of a sinister collective conducting eco-terrorism? Was there a level of coordination? Were any organisations with a history of law-breaking involved in order to further their respective narratives?
So she didn't provide any evidence that occurred, but she's just saying that it should be investigated. And while we're on the subject of arson here, this is from Fairfax in late January. We don't know whether there's been any more arson cases uncovered here. Like nothing we've ever seen before, police step up bushfire investigations, and it talks about the 1,700 bushfires already reported to police. Of those 700, police say that 716 were deliberately lit, which is quite a lot than the 24 people who New South Wales Police had charged at the time, which was earlier in January there. So certainly we are facing a arson epidemic problem, and it needs to be acknowledged because arsonists, as I've said before, their destructiveness is basically the same as pedophiles on communities. They can destroy, scar communities, and it is, as I went through in a previous show, it is actually clinical psychology has described it as a psychological disorder, or even in some cases a sexual fetish. And Peter Dutton, who's the Home Affairs Minister, he said this was last week. He wasn't also afraid to make sure that the arson link wasn't ignored, even though the ABC had said it was fake news. So this is him with ABC Radio National's Patricia Karvelis. Obviously, we've all pointed out we're experiencing hotter weather, longer summers. This is her. But did the bushfires start in some of these regions because of climate change? And Peter Dutton said, no, it started because somebody lit a match. There are 250 people, as I understand. I'm not sure where you got that figure from. Or more than that have been charged with arson. That's not climate change. I know that some climate change advocates have said, obviously some fires are deliberately lit, but climate change is making the effects of these deliberately lit fires even worse, which is basically saying, the arsonist didn't mean to cause that much destructiveness, but climate change exacerbated the intended destruction that they were trying to cause with the bushfires. As I've said, I hope that when these arsonists are before court, there's not some lawyer who said, oh, they shouldn't get a harsh sentence because a lot of the impact of the bushfire was not from them actually starting the fire, but it was exacerbated by climate change. Yeah, so I've given an idea for a legal defense, but there's probably other people are probably thinking of that as well. But going on to my next topic, that was probably the biggest political journalist troublemaker at the moment. Peter Van Onselen, political editor of Network 10, has been hounding the Morrison government over the sports rorts saga, which we'll get to in a moment. But this week, I think maybe so it didn't look like he was picking on the Conservative side of politics all the time. He uncovered this Labour ginger group called the Otis Group that was having regular dinners in Canberra. Otis stands for Outside the Inner Sanctum. They were a pro-coal ginger group because obviously after Labour lost the unlosable election because of Bill Shorten's 50% renewable energy target, some sense has been knocked into Labour MPs, especially the ones who nearly lost their seats, like Joel Fitzgibbon, who's the member for Hunter and in the New South Wales coal mining region just past Newcastle there. Senator Slayer has said, sent through his $2 Australian, you're foaming out of the mouth, Tim. Coronas. Maybe I'll just take a sip of water. If you are worried about that. We will get to a corona update towards the end of the show as well. But this was Peter Van Onselen's follow-up report on Network 10 last night.
Our exclusive story last night exposing a shadowy right-wing splinter group in the Australian Labor Party was the talk of Canberra today. And it turns out the so-called Otis Group is also the political equivalent of the Keystone Cops, who accidentally included a government staffer on their secret emails. Peter Van Onselen has more now on the story he broke.
Last night we exposed the group of key Labor Party members secretly meeting to air grievances.
PVO, how are you, mate?
Where Don Farrell was made up perfectly, makeup on, he runs into PVO. Imagine seeing you here, PVO.
Oh, the Otis Group is just a group of...
Senator Farrell, what we say to you, what we say to Senator Sterle, Senator Kitching, Senator Chisholm, Senator Polly, Senator Chakotay, welcome to the world
Order, Senator Cash.
And frustrations with Anthony Albanese's policy direction.
Courtesy of Channel 10, we now know who the members of this coal industry, coal workers supporting Otis Group are.
It was the Otis Group, Mr Speaker. And Van Onselen belled the cat, Mr Speaker, about this rebel group.
The only breakaway I'm aware of is the Otis breakaway.
My suggestion to the Otis Group is to rename themselves.
The Otis Group, apparently you didn't know about this group.
Were you aware of the Otis Group?
Look, let me first...
Which you could say is now more of a public affair.
It's what happens in Canberra. People go out, people chat.
But as it turns out, the Otis Group is no slick operation. Also included in the emails between the group of 20 Labor MPs and senators, with a swathe of frontbenchers on the list, was government staffer David Smith, not Labor's David Smith. Awkward.
And that bit at the end where they accidentally CC'd the wrong David Smith. We've seen those accidental emails sent out to political opposition when Parliament resumed. The Prime Minister's question time talking points were emailed to, I think, the entire press gallery in Labor, and Labor did a stunt during question time. Oh, we've all got the copy of the talking points memo. So I guess those sort of blunders with emails from the high levels of government and power show that governments are not really capable of pulling off major conspiracies if they're accidentally CCing these people in emails. But having said that, we still haven't seen whether there's been an accidental CCing by the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York, where Jeffrey Epstein was being held, and where they accidentally CC'd to somebody they shouldn't have, revealing who killed Jeffrey Epstein. maybe there will be an accidental email like that sent in the future. Port Film Co-op has said that I like pina coladas. No, I don't. I don't like pina coladas. So that song that you're thinking of, no, that doesn't reflect my drink choices. But yes, I think this Otis Group is a good thing from the Labor Party. They're actually learning the lessons of the 2019 election loss, and obviously they're changing their position on coal mining and abandoning Bill Shorten's ludicrous climate renewable energy targets, not because they actually believe it, as because they want to win the next election, and Joel Fitzgibbon wants to retain his seat of Hunter. But Paul Murray on Sky News, he's probably driving Anthony Albanese crazy at the moment. He's developed the nickname for him Each Way Elbow, because he's, as the name suggests, he's trying to have a bob each way, because he's being interviewed by Fran Kelly, and he was saying that a new coal-fired power station would not be built because it wasn't commercially viable. But Frank Kelly pressed him, hang on, you now support coal. He was trying to say that, no, there is no future for coal, but we support coal mining, coal workers. And you saw in that piece there, Deputy Leader of the Labor Party, Richard Miles, he was sort of, you should have seen him on ABC Insiders with David Spears when he was asked these questions. Oh, it was a shocker. He was fumbling all over the place. It was totally embarrassing. And Matt Canavan, you should definitely follow him on Twitter now that he's an unshackled Nationals backbencher. He's posting some quite spicy tweets. He talked about the Otis Group, the pro-coal group, and said, "Hey, I didn't get an invite to this dinner in Canberra. I'm pro-coal. What's a guy got to do?" Which I thought was quite funny. But as Anthony Albanese said, and this was backed up by Stephen Conroy, people meet in Canberra, politicians meet up in Canberra to discuss ideas, policies. It's obviously it's not a secretive, sinister group if they're meeting in a restaurant in Canberra, where basically you could just put a tin can listening device there and hear what they were saying. Anyone could if you're one table away. So not exactly super secretive, sensitive stuff. Now, the Closing the Gap report is going to be delivered to the federal parliament, which is closing the gap between the standard of living for the Australian population at large, health and education outcomes, and Indigenous Australians. And Pauline Hanson, since she first got into Parliament, has decried the special privileges and advantages that Indigenous Australians are afforded when all Australians should be equal, and that there are better ways to close the gap than simply just spend more taxpayers' money. And this is what she said in the Senate, which of course got people upset. Let's play this. I think it's further down. Oh, here we go. Yep, just bringing it up now.
The gap is complete rubbish, and my thoughts are echoed by many Aboriginals who take the time to meet with me. As far as I'm concerned, it's a joke. You can't blame the whites when it's your own negligence. We can throw all the money in the world at building these schools with 3 meals a day for $2 to make sure Aboriginal kids are given a wholesome meal while they're at school, but if they don't turn up, how do they get ahead in life? If you want to close the gap, start taking some responsibility for your own people. As the old saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. We've provided the schools. It's now up to you to send your own kids to school. We've provided the jobs, but it's up to you to turn up when you're rostered on, not when it suits. It's up to the Aboriginals to stay off the grog and the drugs. I will leave you with my final thoughts. Closing the gap should be about treating all Australians equally and on an individual needs basis, not one based on race. These government policies that are based on race are themselves discriminatory and racist.
Yes, so Pauline Hanson delivered that in a very blunt style, and it was too blunt for even some who are on the conservative side of politics. Andrew Bolt, he didn't like that she generalised all Aborigines as needing to take responsibility, that she shouldn't have used that clumsy collectivist language, because obviously there are Aboriginal Australians, and the population of Aboriginal Australians is increasing, as you can see in the latest census, and they do take responsibility. Not all of them are disadvantaged, and I saw Jacinta Price on the Kenny report earlier this evening, and she talked about that it's taking responsibility is obviously part of it, and that is not just applied to those Aboriginal Australians who are in a dysfunctional and disadvantaged situation, but Australians of any ethnicity and socio-economic group. If we had a lot more personal responsibility in Australia rather than relying on governments to do everything at us, we'd have a more cohesive society. But it's not just, it's a combination of things, and a lot these policies that we have, the endless welfare, and that these paternalistic policies, and the left, of course, they support this, as Philip E. Armstrong, one of our writers, called it, the Aboriginal superstructure. They have this bigotry of low expectations, and they think that Aborigines should live in these remote communities where there's poor housing and not much access to services, because it's their culture, and that we should excuse some of the more heinous thing that's happened there because it's their culture, and a lot of them are only that way because of white settlement has upset their cohesive culture, and it's white racism that keeps them down. And of course, if you're told that it's your community is a disadvantage, not because of you don't have any responsibility of that, it's because the white man continues to be racist for it. But of course, there are Aboriginal Australians there's some that live in these remote communities, which living remotely has disadvantage there. You're cut off from a lot of services and from society at large, but there are a lot of Aboriginal Australians who are living in the inner cities, and of course their standard of living, health and education is on par with the rest of Australians there. So it is the fact that we still have these remote communities, and why should, because a human being in Australia happens to be born in an Aboriginal remote community, why should people decide that their life should be confined to that remote community? I mean, some social justice warriors claim that it's even racist to teach them English. There's this the left seem to have this idea of the noble savage. They basically want to put Tim Wilson once described it, they want to put Aborigines in museums, that's how they believe that because you're of Aboriginal ethnicity, that's how you should live. But no, we're all Australians, and everyone should benefit from the modern medicines, education, standard of living, technology that we've created there. And of course, I talked about earlier this week on Trans Tasman Talk the High Court decision this week, 4-3, that if you've got Aboriginal ancestry in you, then and if you're a non-citizen and you commit a serious crime, you cannot be deported, because the High Court says even though you're not a citizen, because you've got Aboriginal blood ethnicity in you, you cannot be considered an alien and cannot be deported, which basically creates two classes of Australians, and there's been a lot of talk about, because this is the High Court, and you can't, the only way to overrule the High Court is if by a referendum, but they've just invented this new citizenship law basically out of thin air. But it was 4-3, the High Court was split on it. But Pauline Hanson, she is right that all Australians should be treated equally. All Australians should get the same opportunities, or be able to fulfill their potential. Obviously, there should not be equality of outcomes, but just because a child is born in a remote Indigenous community doesn't mean that their life should be confined to there, and they shouldn't have to put up with and be the victim of some of the more horrific cultural practices and dysfunctions that we've heard of. And by definition as well, if you're living in the city, why should you get an advantage in education because or any other part of community or career because you have Aboriginal ancestry, which is not available to non-Aboriginal Australians? So that's my take on it. We can close the gap if we just get rid of the toxic race politics of it, and we stop basically this. It'd be so much more helpful if the left stopped feeding this victim narrative and this white racism narrative, because it just perpetuates hostilities, and we're not going to get anywhere if, as I spoke about at the beginning of the show, the toxicity of modern politics, it's driving people to basically ill health. And as we've seen with the Closing the Gap report, it's also not helping a large swath of the Australian community, this toxic politics, and especially identity politics, social justice. So we'll finish off now with the the ongoing sports rorts saga, which obviously Bridget McKenzie, she was the sports minister before the election, was moved to agriculture after the election, Deputy Nationals leader. She resigned, which triggered the turmoil in the National Party, not because of the sports grants favoured marginal electorates. The Morrison government still says that all grants, the clubs that receive the grants, they're all eligible. It was just that Bridget McKenzie, she had an undeclared membership of a gun club which received a sports grant. But there's a Senate inquiry into this now, and the Auditor General said that, well, he claimed that was that 43% of the clubs that received the grants were ineligible, but only by the time they received the grant. So they were eligible when the grants were authorized, but not when they received them, which is sort of, that's, you're getting into sort of political spin there, because they were eligible at the time, but just not when they received the money. So there's been a lot of headline spinning that, Morrison claimed they were all eligible when they weren't, but this is the devil in the detail. Jackie Lambie, crossbench senator, she has said that she's not going to vote for the Morrison government's ensuring integrity bill, which would have a trade would be able to disqualify trade union officials from their positions if they had serious criminal convictions. Have them ruled ineligible on character grounds, such as John Setka, the Victorian Secretary of the CFMEU. She said that if the Morrison government can't show integrity, she's not voting for the bill. She wants the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet to release their report into Bridget McKenzie's membership of the gun club and their wider analysis of the sports grants program. And so this is going on in the Senate committee for the past couple of days, and I'll just finish off because this has been a Twitter war that has emerged this afternoon. Paul Bongiorno, who for decades was the political editor of Network 10, is quite old now, so he just is the political editor for the Saturday paper, is sort of semi-retirement. This is what he said about Matthias Cormann's testimony about the sports grants. I noticed that the finance minister is into assertion. He asserts against evidence of the independent auditor after 10 months of investigation that everyone was eligible. It's a technique invented by Goebbels, the big lie. Obviously, Joseph Goebbels it was the Nazi propaganda minister under Adolf Hitler. Matthias Cormann, he actually took the time to respond to this himself, because he was born in Belgium, in the German speaking part of the country. Matthias Cormann said, "Are you for real? I speak with a German accent, so you accuse me of being a Nazi? You are absolutely despicable, Paul Bongiorno. You clearly do not know what you're talking about. This is a disgrace and you should apologize." And Paul Bongiorno said, I'm not sure he was responding to Cormann or somebody else, but said, "Give me a break. The minister is Belgian. He's Flemish. You are a dumb, ignorant bastard." And I haven't got the tweet here on the screen here, but if Matthias Cormann rightly said that I'm not Belgian, I'm an Australian. And obviously to sit in the Australian Parliament and be finance minister, Matthias Cormann, he can only be an Australian citizen because dual citizens aren't allowed in the Parliament. And Matthias Cormann is very proud Australian now. But yes, just on this, because everyone who plays identity politics and likes to cry racism is still banging on that people are being racist and discriminatory towards Chinese Australians because of the coronavirus. And it has had a big impact on Chinese restaurants in Australian major cities, but it's not white people by themselves who are staying away and causing the drop in business. It's Chinese Australians themselves are not going to these restaurants as well. But this has got nothing to do with race. It's more just people being worrywarts, hypochondriacs, and basically just being idiots, because apparently there was this story on Sky this afternoon. A woman took her child to the doctor thinking he had coronavirus because he'd been near a Chinese child, which is just stupid. There's only been the cases of coronavirus in Australia. They're people who've come back from Wuhan and they've been diagnosed with the coronavirus in Australia. And as a lot of people have been talking about, you've got more chance of catching the flu during the winter flu season than actually, obviously, coronavirus is much more deadly, but you can still die from the common cold and flu, pneumonia. So yes, this is just more people just being idiots and freaking out, as a lot of people do. It's got nothing to do with race. Well, obviously, the fact that it did break out in Wuhan, China, where, well, people of the Chinese race live, you can't completely detach race from the coronavirus. But the reason why I raised this is because Paul Bongiorno was actually being racist against Matthias Cormann, because he was, well, I should say that Paul Bongiorno did actually apologise in the end. I did not mean to infer Matthias Cormann as a Nazi, and I unreservedly apologise, but obviously he speaks with a German accent, Matthias Cormann, so it can be argued that did Paul Bongiorno make this assertion because Matthias Cormann speaks with a German accent, because that would be racist to basically say that all people of German ethnicity who speak with a German accent are Nazis. And I saw Erica Betts, he was also interviewed on the Kennedy Report this afternoon. He was born in Germany, and he spoke about how he's relentlessly trolled on Twitter and called a Nazi because he was born in Germany. Betts is obviously a German name, and that's racist to call him a Nazi because he was born in Germany. He's of German ethnicity. So if you're saying it's racist to basically be cautious around Chinese people because of the coronavirus, then it's racist to call someone a Nazi because they're German. My surname Wilms is German, but people call me a Nazi regardless of that. So that's nothing new. But yes, but of course Germans are white people, so you cannot be racist against white people. But that brings me to the end of tonight's show. It did go a bit over an hour, but thank you to everyone for being patient through the software update. I hope that you enjoy the rest of Valentine's Day. If you haven't got a Valentine for tonight, I'm sure that one is just around the corner. Sending you all my love. I'll be back Monday night for another episode of WilmsFront, hopefully at 7 p.m. Melbourne time. I'll double check all of the tech before we start. But the Australian primetime alt media lineup, well, it doesn't just start with WilmsFront on Monday. Obviously, that's start of the working week. But tomorrow night, Matty Rosenberg live at 9 p.m. Melbourne time on the Matty Rose Live YouTube channel. And then, of course, well, the whole thing starts again on Monday. If you want to support the production of WilmsFront and other Unshackled productions, you can take out an Unshackled membership at theunshackled.net/membership, as well as sending through super chats either through YouTube or Entropy during our shows. We are also on Subscribestar. We have a web donation form at theunshackled.net/donate, and also a store at theunshackled.net/store. So enjoy your weekend, everybody. It was quite stormy outside in Melbourne this afternoon, but it has cooled down now. The heat wave seems to be over. Of course, extreme weather must be climate change, but it's just summer has always been tropical in Australia, not just in Queensland. So have a good weekend and stay safe, and I love you all.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com or Rational Rise TV to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting theunshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.